What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we continue our sojourn to Beverly Hills. And yet again, I am joined by Jack to recount me through the saga. How are you doing, Jack? You okay?
I'm fantastic, thanks. And, it's always good to spend a bit of time away in the sun.
That's it, yeah.
Particularly if it's with Vax or Foley.
That's it, yeah. Get some fun, steal somebody's house. Enjoy the time, some time in there, Paul.
Yeah, I've got thoughts about that moment in the movie, actually. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah. Yes. We are talking about Beverly Hills Cop 2. 3 years after the success, the runaway success of Beverly Hills Cop. I actually checked. I did some. It was the one of the top films of 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Just pipped to the post by Ghostbusters. But was such a runaway success that actually resulted in The Golden Child being pushed forward. And I read Wild and Crazy Guys by Nick DeSemblin, and I was very curious. And the Golden Child wasn't a success. It wasn't a good experience for Murphy. And when he came out, he sort of came out of it saying it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. It was going to be something different. The director took it in a different direction. And he described it as a diluted version of Axel Foley. And so he was determined to get back on track and bring back Axel Foley. Paramount more than happy to do so. And it was Eddie Murphy that chose Tony Scott. And he was very sort of quite involved in the plotting and the scripting. Not so much adding things, but like he worked with them so they could be like, oh yeah, here's where you can ad lib, here's where you can do this, but this has got to be this. Like this is where Tony Scott's going to be quite fixed in the way he's going to approach things, but you can go loose here and there. So very much involved in all that. And it was a very slick experience. Eddie Murphy was very pleased with it, but audiences, it was a huge success, made a lot of money, but critics kind of ripped it apart a little bit.
It's interesting, isn't it? I wonder how much of that is that whole, build people up to tear them down again. I wonder if there's some of that in there. Or, this guy thinks he's a big shot now. But I cards on the table quite early. I don't think it's as good as the first one. I do think it's a step back. I do think interesting that you said he used the word diluted. I do think this is diluted down. And Tony Scott's a really interesting choice, isn't he? If I understand correctly, Marty Brest turned it down, so did offer it to him first. And I get why Tony Scott would be on everyone's mind. He's just made Top Gun. I mean, that made a fair bit of change as well.
Yeah.
But isn't a action comedy director?
No.
He's an action director.
Well, I think the point that they wanted was he's a style director.
Yeah, sure.
That I think and so one of the things I think that Eddie Murphy is quoting the book is he wanted the film to really, and you say about his ego, people being built up to knock back down. This is clearly an ego piece. I can see it. And one of the things he said, with working with Tony Scott, was that Eddie Murphy wanted to look as good as possible throughout the film. He wanted to become a legit movie star. And
there's one moment early on when he's in the opening credits and he's putting on the suit and stuff, and he looks really sharp, to be fair to him. There's a definite butt objectification shot of Murphy. So that makes sense. It's pre JCVD, but there's a little bit of Murphy butt in there for sure in his tight slacks. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. He does look like a movie star in this. So definitely worked.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think I'd be interested to see what you say it's not as good as the first. I think we'll get into that because I sort of agree and I don't. I think it's almost like there's levels, when you sort of go, well, that's down, but that's up, and I kind of like this and that and that's the. So it's a weird combination. But to me, this is a milestone 80s movie because I think I think I saw this before the first one, which may be why I hold this. I have this one in quite high regard. But everything from like the music to the costuming to the style, this feels like one of those sort of milestone 80s movies to me.
Yeah, that's fair. It's that old analogy which we use quite a lot, isn't it? Like with bands as well. Like that first album is a bit raw, and like Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs to Pulp Fiction, it's like that. Beverly Hills Cop is a little bit choppy, a little bit messy, a little bit
Yeah.
raw at times. Whereas slick is the great word for it. This is much more slick, much more polished. It is a Hollywood movie. But yeah, I think for me, and we'll get into it more as you say, it just feels like it loses a bit of that edge. It loses a bit of its step because of that. But it makes perfect sense that's the direction he wanted to go in.
Yeah, I think it is. And you know, he was. I think you can see that in the last when we talked about Beverly Hills Cop. Pre to that, there'd been 48 Hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that there was like, you know, maybe not a step change, maybe like an incremental change between 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop, where it was like, oh, 48 Hours is like angry, in your face, stand up comic Eddie Murphy, you know, slinging the N word and all this other stuff around, like, you know, nobody's business. Pulls it in a little bit, but still raw enough with Beverly Hills Cop. And then this feels like Hollywood accepted Murphy. You know, raw enough that it's sort of like it could feel edgy at the time, but yeah, still audience friendly, let's say.
Yeah, I'm not surprised it made a lot of money. Not at all. It's fast in every way that you can think of that way. Like it's only like 90 minutes, isn't it? It's like in and out, or maybe an hour and 40, but it's real tight. But you know, the pacing is really well done. It moves at a click. It just keeps going and keeps going. There's never a dull moment. So I could see why this would be a massive hit, definitely.
One of the things before we sort of get into the plot, I think we were getting into the plot because it sort of feeds into that. But I have an interesting question for you as we get into it. So the film kicks off in sort of there's two running stories going on. We have in Detroit, you know, Detective Axel Foley on another bust. Instead of playing a sort of like a cigarette selling sort of wannabe gangster, he's now dealing in credit cards, driving a Ferrari, wearing a £2,000 Armani suit, dressed up to the nines, basically conning the police out of their budget, and you know, to bust this case. But in California, actually, Captain Bogomil is sort of leading. Well, he's leading an investigation into the ABC or letter. They call them letter.
Alphabet, I think.
The alphabet, thank you. Yeah, the alphabet crimes, the alphabet robberies. And we see the first one is a jewel store, and he's been investigating that. So you have these two investigations, very sort of going on, and the one in California results in the second sort of crime being the shooting of Captain Bogomil, and
B for Bogomil.
Yeah, and Axel Foley hears about it over the radio, and so contacts. This is why I love things on the 80s. He just gets through and there's like, patch me through to the hospital, and then
yeah. Well, he sees it on TV first, doesn't it? He's in Detroit,
radio,
waiting for his credit card, and it's a news report.
Mm.
News coming out of LA in Detroit. Are you sure that?
Yeah, this is.
I don't think that's how local news works.
No, is this national
in
news?
America? Because
yeah.
But anyway, yeah. Who cares? And then you're right. Yeah. Then it's just like he calls up, doesn't he, from the phone?
Yeah.
Put me through to the hospital. Just immediately gets the payphone where they are.
Yeah.
Like,
I love stuff like that. No question asked.
Yeah. It's just yeah.
And then like it's, you know, Caesar going to be there and sort of convinces Inspector Todd, his superior, that he's going to go deep undercover, and jets off to California, leaving Paul Reiser to look after the Ferrari. That opening bit there, that sort of interweaving of those two stories and sort of this opening bit and going up to the shooting and sort of the introduction of the crime and all this other stuff. How do you feel coming into this film?
I like the setup because I think it's quite a natural way to get him back to Beverly Hills. They had to find a way to get him back, and it's really the most obvious way is for him to have formed a bond with these people from the first movie, because it's 2 years later, isn't it? And for something to have happened to one of those. I sort of wish it had the courage of its convictions. You know, Bogomil gets absolutely annihilated from point blank range and survives, but that's neither here nor there. So I think the setup's good. I don't really buy any of the alphabet stuff. It's all really
The alphabet plot barely makes any sense.
yeah, it doesn't. But again, you know, we're not really here for the plot, are we? This guy sitting over here who's just watched all these Statham movies criticizing the plot, yeah, throwing stones in my glass house over here. But yeah, I think it works really well. I like it, and you know, we've referenced 48 hours because we have to. It makes much more sense coming back into this world than another 48 hours does, which makes no sense at all. So yeah, I like that. I mean, there are leaps of faith. I mean, do I believe that Bogomil and Foley go off on fishing trips? No, I do not. But do I believe that they all really like each other and respect each other because of the events of the first movie? Yeah, I do.
Okay, that was the point I wanted to hone in on. Was this thing of the relationship between Axel and Andrew Bogomil, like the fact that they've built this thing. I actually kind of like it, and I actually there's it's the fact that it isn't like 2 years later and they're like, oh, we had a thing 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and now I'm back. Like they've continued that thing, and actually there's a point later on where like the events of the first film almost lost Axel Foley his job, and Captain Bogomil sort of stepped up, defended him, and made sure that he didn't. So they've bonded, but one of the things we pointed out in the last episode was a respect building up, because Axel's like a street cop and everything, and Bogomil's like, I see that in you. You know, he's the one that's picking up. And the opening of this film does exactly the same, where although it's like Murphy going like, no, I'm going hell for leather, I'm going to wearing a suit and stuff. It's still him undercover, and it's actually Bogomil doing detecting, doing police work that results in him getting shot. So I like the fact that they've bonded over this thing. They're very different characters, and they are going to set. And it's that because if it was like, oh, he'd bonded with Billy and John Taggart, I'd be a little bit more like, okay, that feels weird. They were a bit more antagonistic, but I kind of appreciate it. Like they're like, yeah, the cops, we've bonded together, and he's sort of like I can imagine there's like a mentoring relationship there.
Yeah, it sort of hints at like the Bogomil past, doesn't it? That maybe he was a bit like Foley back in his day, and he's been almost, this isn't the right word, but I can't, this is the word that's coming to me. He's been like gentrified by the Beverly Hills.
Yeah, no, that's a fair shout. Yeah.
System. And then he's like, oh, but I remember when I was like that, and that was more exciting. And he's sort of getting back into that now because of his interactions with Foley in the first one.
I can imagine that, them having those conversations where there's a Bogomil prequel set in the 70s.
Yeah.
Where he's like in Los Angeles rather than Beverly Hills. And I kind of like that now.
Yeah, I'd watch that.
Played by, I don't know, someone, I'd have to figure that out later. But yeah, I like that relationship is built. The one time it feels really weird as a relationship is basically when he admits to Bogomil that he would do his daughter.
Oh, yeah. If Jan wasn't your daughter, I definitely would. I would certainly have respect for you.
And Bogomil's response is like, yeah, she's great, isn't she? And I'm like, oh, no, that's not the right response. That's not the right response at all. So, yeah, it kind of feels like maybe that was like an Eddie Murphy riff, and like Ronnie Cox is like, no, I'll respond, and that was his response, and they're just like, yeah, leave it in. No, that's the best we're gonna get. But you do introduce Jan, the daughter, and you do have that relationship, and I like that there's this expanding family element to it. It made me actually think of other franchises I've been watching, sort of working my way through. And like the most recently, sort of Bad Boys. We made a reference to Bad Boys too, but like Bad Boys, obviously for life, and Ride and Die's come out, but also the Lethal Weapon franchise, where each film sort of like builds up those family dynamics where people come in, and I was like, yeah, that feels similar to that. Like where it could have gone a different. We'll see how Beverly Hills Cop Axel F goes. So I have a feeling it's going to do something similar, but we'll see. But I like that introduction. Let's go to the other side though. We've had the build. What about the villains in this from the opening? The statuesque and very
Mm.
striking Bridget Nielsen, and the rest,
Well,
basically.
very striking is the right word. I think she's actually pretty good in this.
Yeah,
I just definitely wouldn't have her as my lead in a heist because she's
so
very
recognizable.
recognizable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know they kind of call it out later, to be fair to them. They're like, well, this town's full of 6 foot blondes.
Mm.
But Bridget Nielsen is a very striking,
Yes.
memorable 6 foot blonde. So yeah, she wouldn't be my first choice for the team. But I thought I like the opening heist. I think it's pretty good actually. It's again, parts of it make no sense when they're like shooting like all the cabinets and stuff. It goes a bit wild and crazy. It's almost like a Batman 66 or Jack Nicholson in Batman 89 kind
Yes.
of villainous heist, especially when they then put the envelope down. It's like the Riddler clue.
It's supposed to be loud and noisy though, isn't it? That's part of the thing. The
Yeah.
the the one thing that makes me chuckle, and I don't know, it's sort of something I've seen in lots of films where it's that you'll have like the CCTV camera.
Hmm.
They step in front of it and then spray it, and you're like, yeah, you've just given someone a square on picture of your face, and then you spray paint it. That can't be right.
Because she's
Um,
just wearing like big sunglasses as well,
yeah,
isn't she? The rest
yeah,
of them have like balaclavas and stuff on, but
yeah. No, you're right. I actually think she is very good in this. I mean, she was obviously a model, and I think and possibly a gymnast. I can't remember. She's done incredibly athletic. Obviously, sort of most before this she'd done Rocky 4.
yeah, did that come before this, didn't it?
Yeah, that's 84, and just before this she'd also done
Mm.
Red Sonja,
Hmm.
and I think she's fine in Rocky 4. I think
Yeah, she's not asked to do much, is she? Other than be
exactly, yeah.
statuesque, yeah.
Yeah, Red Sonja,
Mm.
bit of a mess, but I think she's perfectly. I think she's really good in this. I think she strikes
Yeah,
the right tone.
yeah, she sets a good, yeah, tone's good. She's like that kind of like a Bond villainess,
Yeah.
or and actually, it made me really think of Transporter too.
Yes.
Very like I could see how that's influenced a lot of these kind of later action movies where you've got this woman who is attractive to look at but is a badass as well. I think
Mm.
this is a really early version of that.
Yeah, and like Kingsman, the first Kingsman film, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Oh,
Um.
that's Sophia Botella, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. We talked again in the first one. So the main villain was Stephen Burkoff as Victor Maitland.
yeah.
This time we get the other generic foreign
Yeah,
actor is playing Maxwell Dent, Jurgen Prochnow, who
yeah,
I love, who's got
yeah.
another sort of like he's just sort of born to be a villain in so many things, and I think he's good in this as well.
Mm, agreed. I mean, in one scene, you get him and Dean Stockwell. It's
Yes,
like, what? So, good
yeah,
value for money here. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Dean Stockwell's a bit wasted, sadly, but yeah, I think Jurgen Prochnow is great. I think. Oh yeah, I mean, as soon as you said it is. It's like hire a Euro villain, isn't it?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
he's not available. Get the other one then. Well, we've already used him, so get the other one then.
yeah, yeah. Just rotate them in at some
Yeah.
point. I mean, I'm kind of sad that Max von Sydow did not make it into a that would have been ace.
Mm. But he feels villainous. He
Yes.
feels like a credible threat again.
Yeah, again, he plays because it's a slightly similar character. I like the fact that they've maintained this thing of these California villains. Like they are gangsters, but they're businessmen. Like you're not dealing with, particularly with thugs. These are guys that distance themselves from it. They are so it's all about money and power and all that kind of thing. So you do
And
manage to get that.
sorry, yeah, and his plan kind of tallies together. It's the like the outlandish kind of plot within the plan is the silliness and the kind of the way that Foley puts together the clues is really like honk, here's the clue. But
Yeah.
actually his plan of like doing these things that will all add up to help him sell these guns and they're worth 10 million more in this market. All of that actually, yeah, again, that's quite credible. I believe all of that. I think that's something a nefarious businessman would be up to, would rob himself in order to make it. Yeah, that all works for me.
Yeah. No, it's what you say. I think it's the way it's put together as a sort of as a reveal rather than the
Yeah.
plan itself.
I'm going to break into one drawer and find the exact map coordinates for where I need to. Okay.
Or out of a car crash, a single matchbook is the one thing I take from the car crash.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's little things like that aren't great, but it's fine. The other characters, I say, yeah, you got Dean Stockwell and you get some thoughts. Dean Stockwell, again, is another actor I kind of like. Obviously, for me, first introduction was Quantum Leap, and then seen him in other things since. But it's also good to see Judge Reinhold and John Ashton back as well. They again do you feel they still got the same chemistry? Do you think it works now that they're sort of friendlier rather than being sort of adversarial?
I do. I think some of the elements they tried to add in aren't that successful. I don't really care about Taggart's backstory with his ex-wife, Maureen. That doesn't really add up to much. But I like what they've done with Billy. I think that really works, that he's trying to become this kind of hero cop based on the events of the first one. I think that really works. And obviously the meta jokes of Stallone and Cobra are fantastic. Yeah, I think it works really well because I think at times, I think the other thing which pulls us down a little bit for me is when this movie falls into that like sequelitis issue, where it's like we've got to recreate that scene and we've got to redo that scene and we've got to. Oh, we won't get Eddie Murphy doing the okay sign this time. We'll get Paul Reiser doing it. It falls into that a little bit, but they have developed their relationship, so that I do think that works. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it seems you're right because I think there's they've shifted the relationship a little bit. Like there's a respect and a sort of, I wouldn't go as far as an admiration, but they've clearly had some kind of relationship since the events of the first film. Like they may have gone on some of the fishing trips. Like they're not strangers. And so, but I agree that there's that sort of feel of sequelitis and in twofold. I agree with what you're saying totally about this sort of let's relive that worked before. Let's do that again. There's a little bit of that, but there's also, like you say, this escalation in character, and I feel that the backstory of Taggart's wife leaving him and all this other stuff, and also to an extent Billy's need to become Rambo or like Cobra, feels like they're like, they were a bit two-dimensional. Or they weren't fully rounded characters in the first film. We're going to give them backstories now, and it kind of feels shoehorned in. Like neither of that really needs to happen, but at least the Billy stuff does. Well, no, I want to talk about the Billy stuff when we get to it because it feels kind of weird because Taggart doesn't seem to know.
That's true. Yeah.
Like it's his. They're meant to be like partners. And then he pulls stuff out the boot and he's like, Jesus, Billy. And I'm like, do you not ride with this guy like every day? Like, is this not your partner? But I do like their relationship. I think they all work well. Let's talk about the bit we want to talk about is the way that Foley handles himself when he does come to Beverly Hills. Because he is this sort of like element of chaos that sort of which is fun, which is what I really like, but basically convincing an entire building crew to leave so that he can take the house just by accident, coming across one that's been renovated. When I was a kid, I loved that scene. It's exactly the same as you said, sequelitis. It's the same thing he does in the import dock thing in the first film.
Yeah, and the hotel is what I was thinking of as well. Yeah. Like convincing them that he was the journalist so he could stay in the hotel. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's the fact that like nobody seems to question him. Can I call someone? Can we talk to your superior? Like who's signed off on this?
Yeah, it also feels a little bit like we spoke about in the first one about like kind of the working class element and the blue collar and the class element, that it was the Detroit versus the wealth of Beverly Hills. And here it feels like this feels like not misconstrued, misjudged. This feels misjudged for me. Yeah. Because fine, he's screwing over the rich house owner. Ha ha ha. That's fine. Like, haha, the hotel, they'll be fun. They're making loads of money with the ridiculously overpriced room. But he's also screwing over like the working class men,
the people working on it,
because when they come back, they're going to be really pissed off with them. They're probably not going to get that contract anymore. It's going to be taken out of their hands. So Yeah, I think probably when I watched it when I was younger, I was probably the same as you. Like, oh, he's so good at doing this stuff, but this time it felt, yeah, it didn't feel quite right watching the scene.
I was when I was just googling about this.
Hmm.
I can't credit him, I forget it, but I saw this article, and it basically sort of it was in preparation for Axel F, and it was just looking back at the previous films, and it made a point about how the shift in Axel. You said about the class thing. Axel Foley in the first one laughs at people as he enters, sort of like he's in that beaten up car, and
Mm.
he thinks like Beverly Hills is a joke. Like he sees it as this
Hmm.
pretentious kind of the fakery of it. But like in this film, like you're introduced to him putting on an Armani suit. Now he does
Hmm.
laugh at himself in the mirror, which is kind of sort of suggestive towards that. But then he's actually like he's basically robbing the police department of its budget and the
Mm.
taxpayer of its money
Mm.
to pay for him to fart about in a Ferrari and be this sort of. There's no need for him to be wearing an Armani suit and drive the Ferrari. It's all a con that he's doing. And it's the same in this situation where he feels like there's almost like a bitterness now
Mm.
to Foley, where he's like, no, I'm going to get mine. Like
Yeah, bitterness.
um,
That's exactly the right word. That is exactly what it is. Yeah.
and it feels kind of weird for this character to have that. Um, but like it is almost like a spitefulness. It's not
Hmm.
overt, but it is like oh yeah, there's a house, so they're rich. I'm gonna have a bit of that.
Mm.
Um, and stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, it just feels. Is that because he's seen what the people of Beverly Hills have, and it's sort of like opened his eyes to it? I don't know, but it feels a little uncomfortable watching it today. When I was watching
Mm.
it, thinking, oh yeah, this is actually a little bit
No,
jarring.
I completely agree with you, and I think that sort of spitefulness again, great word. That sort of tone stays throughout the movie. I think the comedy is a bit more spiteful here. It is a bit more bitter. It is, and I think that's probably coming from Murphy himself, right? That
Mm,
sense of who he's become now as a star is somebody who feels like is owed something, and that comes out in the character of Axel F. Unfortunately.
that's a really good point. Well, yeah, this is a representation of where Murphy was. He'd been bitten, having done. There was the massive success of the first Beverly Hills Cop, bitten by the failure, or the mediocrity of Golden Child, and so
Which
was
I really
really.
like, by the way.
Yeah, I know. It's a good film. I
Yeah.
think it's Brother Numpsy. I'm all for like
Absolutely.
it's a good film.
I want the knife. Like
Yeah.
that stays with me forever.
Um, didn't land at the time. I think it's that
No.
crossover of like fantasy and
Hmm.
stuff. But um, yeah, he was looking to prove himself again that he wasn't
Mm.
like a one-hit wonder that he could hold. And I do feel that there's something in that like
Mm.
there's a desire to show Hollywood and some of those detractors that he could do it again. So yeah, no, that's interesting. That,
And I
that
found
that's
the
coming through.
montage scene really misjudged in this movie as well. And again, it's echoing the first one, but it just in the ordering. So, he's come to Beverly Hills again. He's come to LA again because Bogan has been shot, right?
Mm,
He's in a coma at this point. They don't overtly use that word, but that is what he's in. He arrives. The first thing he does is go and see him, as all good friends would do. And then, as you said, he's driving around Beverly Hills, starting his investigations. He comes across this mansion and he does this scene. But before that, it's that kind of montage with the upbeat music. And it's, like a really attractive Beverly Hills woman walking, looking sexy, a
hmm
shot of her ass. It's two dogs shagging. It's really like a strangely upbeat like montage just after he's been to see Baker Mill in a coma.
Yeah,
Like comforted Jan and all of that was really well handled. And it's like, woohoo, now I'm back in Beverly Hills.
yeah.
It's
And
it's just the whole thing's a
even
bit
the tempo,
misjudged.
you said the music sort of comes up, doesn't it? And it's like,
Yeah.
dun, 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 you're like,
It's like
oh,
that,
we're in.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Actually, it's interesting how that's been put together to be sort of, because it's like there's a lot of things like that, and I think you have to accept it because it's an Eddie Murphy sort of like action comedy. But for example, like later on when Billy and Taggart go to find him at the house,
Hmm.
and then they walk in, and he's in the pool wearing a Hawaiian shirt, drinking juice. He's reading the files, like he's doing the work, but he's doing it whilst he's in the pool. And this isn't like, you mentioned Cobra. Like, this is the anti-Cobra. Like, there's no brooding sort of like, detection going on here. This is action. This is sort of at a pace. So yeah, it does sometimes feel weird, but I think you kind of have to accept that odd tone of, our best friend's clinging on to life, or my mentor is clinging on to life, and I'm going to solve his murder. But first,
Yeah, and it's not unusual, is it? I think it's been this way for this kind of action comedy vehicle. I think it didn't start here, and it certainly didn't end here. It's continued all the way up and into the MCU movies and all these things where people criticize them for having an emotional beat and then a quip and a. So yeah,
if it's balanced right, it works really well
Mhm.
because you can do that because you can alleviate that tension or sort of like the levity lightens the tone. And this is a comedy. Let's be clear.
Yeah,
And even in a good action, I think this is where I always applaud especially the last Bad Boys film. There's a scene where what's his name, the son-in-law in the film. God,
I've not seen the new one, so
oh,
I don't
okay.
know. Sorry.
But basically, there's a really cool fight scene, and you've got Martin Lawrence sort of commenting on it, and you've got this incredible violence with these jokes, and it's that sort of like pitched perfect. And you're going like, oh, you've got that montage element done incredibly well, and I can see that they're aiming for that in this film, and it does work at times. I think, and it also adds an extra flavor of Taggart falling in the pool and having to which is good for two reasons for me. It gives he has that natty suit of the pastel
like
blues blazer.
Golf pro or something, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. But he's also then he's basically stealing another guy's clothes.
Yeah.
For all intent and purposes. So I think it's all working quite well in that way. So yeah, but it just sort of like runs at a pace then. Like once sort of bit, once they've all settled in and it's sort of that's done, it kind of just runs at a pace then. Where it's sort of like scene, clue, it sort of gets through. And it leads them down to the bits and pieces. And so you do get, as you said, some of the similar things. The bit with the vitamins and being very similar to sort of to get him. What's it? The first one is the explosive sound homes in on sound explosive rounds at the gun.
That's the best bit I think in this movie. That's the funniest bit. The waiter comes past us and he splashes the water from the champagne bucket. So
I like that line.
Sweating.
Yeah, he puts his hand in the ice and says, "What year is it?" And he says 74, and he rubs his face and goes, "Yes, it is." I was like,
it's good. And then his performance then as the guy who's like really stressed is really good actually. Eddie Murphy there, and the woman clearly knows he's up to something, but he wins her over by the end. His performance is so good. I think it's great.
There's a joke
it's the funniest
in that
scene, I think.
Yeah, he would, and this is Eddie doing his thing.
Yeah.
But there's a word joke. I had I'm old, by the way, right? I had the subtitles on, as I often do, with sort of like, when I'm really watching a film, I sometimes have the subtitles on so I can watch the dialogue. There's a joke in this I've never known before. And I'm like, I don't think it's supposed to be a joke. But he says he's got twin girls. One's called Monique, one's called Unique.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't catch that.
I was like, that's a really good little word joke. I like that. Like, you got twins, one's called Unique. I like it. That's funny. So yeah, it's work on level. But this is where, like I say, him coming into the shooting club, is where it really kicks into the sort of like, it's almost like the end of sort of this is really Act 2 sort of getting going because it's sort of the confrontation. And this is where I think, like, again, we said all the actors in this are actually doing a really sort of good job. I mean, no one's. It's not Oscar-winning material. This isn't sort of no emotional monologues. But this is where I think Tony Scott kind of shines. He'll do his action, but even like something like this Gun Club, it feels like smoky. The lighting is great. Like, it all feels really sort of moody
It has a
and
Scott look to it. Yeah,
yeah.
lots of blinds with sort of dappled filtered sunlight coming through, and yeah, like smoky atmospheres. Yeah, absolutely. It's a Scott production without a
Oh,
doubt.
yeah, and I love that, and I love that
Yeah, yeah.
aesthetic.
Golden
Um,
hues out when they're out in Beverly Hills. Absolutely, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, that's something. So every shot of this, um,
Hmm.
is brilliant. Like a beautifully sort of shot film.
Yeah, and
Um,
you mentioned character. I think that's actually something that's underrated in Tony Scott's filmography is people knowing the character they're playing.
yeah,
And it sounds stupid and it sounds obvious, but it's really important. You said they're not Oscar worthy, and I agree. You know, nobody's doing anything extraordinary here, but they're playing the character they've been asked to play, which is important when you're trying to create, you know, an ensemble. You're trying to create a world that feels tangible and feels real. I think he is always successful in that.
that's a really good point. And I think that's true. I mean, he's one of those directors that I don't think gets enough. Well, no,
Hmm.
I think he got credit in his day. And I think, since his death and stuff, tragically, sort of like, I think he's been kind of forgotten. Like,
Yes, he's never mentioned in top tier director conversations, is he?
no. And I think, his filmography is, I don't know. I was gonna say patchy, but it's not
It's
terrible.
commercial, isn't it? But
Yes.
but it's consistent. It's
Yeah.
consistent.
I mean, I'm just quick looking at his, the films that he did. I mean, we said Top Gun.
Hmm.
This is the thing, like, when Top Gun, um, I thought this when Top Gun Maverick came out
Hmm.
last year. Everyone was like, "Oh, it's the Tom Cruise film. It's this," and I kept thinking, "No, it was a Tony Scott film. Like it
Hmm.
was Cruise was made a star because of that film. Like
Yeah.
he didn't sell that film, like and I feel that's the same with this. Like I feel there's a thing of Murphy saw Top Gun and was like, "You just made Tom Cruise. Now you're going to make me."
Hmm.
He obviously went back for Days of Thunder, Last Boy Scout, one of my favorite films.
Yeah.
Crimson Tide, Enemy of the State. So he's done the Will Smith
Yeah. Yeah.
film. He's
True
done some great
Romance is
films.
him as well. So yeah, he's got
Yeah,
then he starts working with Denzel. So
and on Fire. Yeah.
yeah.
So
And all of those have people who feel like they exist in that world. So that's the thing
yes,
what I was trying to get to, and I did it really poorly, but it came to me as we were talking. Like Top Gun, they feel like fighter pilots.
yes,
And at times all those other movies, they feel like they are the people they are playing. And I think it's true here. They feel, Bridget Nielsen feels like that character. Dean Stockwell feels like that weaselly
mm.
psychic guy who doesn't really like, but he needs for now. Yeah, I think that's something that Scott is underrated at.
No, that's a really good point actually. Because although he has a style, and I love, sometimes I love being able to sort of like I'll walk into a room and someone's watching a film and I'm like, oh, it's so and so, and you can
Yeah.
recognize certain, that's that film, and like because like a Jim Cameron film,
Hmm. Hmm.
is always recognizable as a Cameron film, and I think Zack Snyder films are recognizable as Zack Snyder films, not always for the best reasons, but
Sure, yeah.
but like there are directors that you go, oh, that's that film.
Hmm.
But one of the things I'll always sort of applaud Scott for is I think is as you say, not only is it a recognizable film, they're kind of macho and they're kind of commercial, and he came
Hmm.
from that uh, music video background.
Yeah, adverts as well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the
Same
things I
as
think that's cool is like Top Gun feels like you said the fighter pilots. It exists in that world. It's all big open skies and it's sort of it's big open. But then you go and watch Last Boy Scout,
Mm.
and they're like, oh no, he's watched like he's making a modern noir private eye film, and it looks the part like this will fit next to a Bogart film.
Mm.
And then he's going, okay, well I'm doing a slick Hollywood, Los Angeles or Beverly Hills action comedy. Cool, we're going to make it look like that. Like he knows exactly what he's doing and
Hmm.
holds people in that world. Um, and I think I think he has that vision, and I think he really is able to hold that together. And yeah, I think I think you're right. It doesn't get lauded enough for it, really.
Mm.
Um, one thing you mentioned after we spoke last time,
Mm.
we missed out on last time, and I felt very bad, but we will definitely raise it now. Is the music.
Yes.
So there's obviously let's talk about it all. But the most the most famous thing is the Axel F
Mhm.
music. But what are your thoughts on the music that's basically for the first one and for this one?
I mean, it's so iconic, isn't it? And unfortunately, we had that phase where it got appropriated by
Like
a crazy
Frog.
frog. Yeah, but it's sort of come back around, hasn't it? And
Yeah.
it is fantastic. I mean, it stays in your head for days, for weeks, but it's never upsetting that it's there. It's always jaunty. It always gives you a little bit of a skip in your step. But this one, it kind of brings in the villainous, darker version of that, doesn't it? So
Mm.
whenever we cut to Bridget Nielsen or Jürgen Prochnow, or it's still very much of a piece, but it's like dark Axel F, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
It's clearly Harold Faltermeyer. It's clearly, you wouldn't need to see the movie if you heard it. Well, that's from a Beverly Hills Cop movie, but it just has this kind of sinister turn to it. I really like it. I think it's a brilliant soundtrack.
I
And
agree.
they won an Oscar, I think, didn't they? For
Yes, I think so. One of the few
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this, because I was quite surprised to see this is one of those things where, again, as you sort of go around, the scores weren't often released in the 80s. That sort of came with like CDs and stuff. But it got a re-release, I think like 2014, 2016, something like that, on LP, and they were like they did a proper job and stuff. And I Googled it and listened to a couple of them on YouTube and stuff. It's brilliant. It's a really good score. I think it's one of those that you sort of. I was thinking about this the other day for I was thinking about sort of iconic franchises and characters and stuff, and how you know Shaft in the sort of the 70s was sort of like Isaac Hayes doing the sort of like Shaft, I dig it kind of thing. It was like you said the character got an anthem.
Yeah.
And you get a couple of that, but then you sort of this shift to the score having something representative. And the 80s was that real period.
Indiana Jones, Axel F, yeah.
Yeah, John Williams in particular, just Superman theme and all this, Raiders March. But they're all sort of like orchestral kind of thing. This is like an 80s synth song, and it's kind of like so poppy, and so it's a bit like it is. If I think of I know I love John Williams, but if you think of John Williams as being the Hollywood establishment, what was the guy's name again? You said the
Harold Faltermeyer.
Harold Faltermeyer is like the Axel F with this music. He's like, no, we're going to do an upbeat, recognizable synth theme that's going to, like you said, stick in your head for days.
Yeah,
and you're going to love it. So it is. It's brilliant. I think that goes into the sound, not just the soundtrack, but the score, but the soundtrack as well. The choice of songs in these films. We were talking about "The Heat Is On" from the first film, and I can't really name the songs in this film, but there's still that same tempo.
Yes, one of the best examples for me is the start of Die Hard with a Vengeance. When it's like hot down somewhere in the city, and again, like I can see the opening of that movie as that song's playing in my head. But I think I agree with you. They match the songs to the images in the Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2 that we've watched so far so seamlessly. Like you can't imagine it being any other song than the one they've picked. I agree.
Yeah, I mean the second. No, it's C. I don't know if it's C or D, but when there's the bank robbery that's going to go on, and they figure it out, and they sort of shoot out the alarm so they can get in there, Billy and Axel, and then they chase it, and Billy turns up in a cement truck.
Yeah.
And then chases them down, but it's a cement truck, chasing these things down. But the music choice again, that song, if it had been the wrong song, that joke would have fallen flat. But it works because there's so much energy in that music, and the sort of the way it's shot again, is so good.
Yeah. I was sorry. That little moment of silence was me desperately racking my brain trying to think, because I did read, but I cannot place the name of the song.
Yeah,
but you're right. Yeah, absolutely. It's about matching the moment, setting the tone again, and I think it does that really well.
Yeah, it does, and I think it keeps you. I mean, just think, this film, it's very poppy. It's very 80s. It's very the soundtrack and it's very 80s. But like you say, it keeps telling you you're having fun. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're seeing stuff, but it's fun. Like, get on board. And it's kind of infectious. I think there's an energy to it. There's a reckless energy to it. Billy plowing through that. He gets basically plows through a police car, and he's like, "I know the guy. He's an asshole." And Axel's laughing at him. You're like, "Cool. You may have just killed someone, but fine. All right. I'm on board." Let's just jump to they use this. They track down to they track down the van, but the money's gone, and then they sort of bloodhound it down, and they follow the tracks, which I'm not entirely sort of sure would work in any sense. Axel Foley is a street cop. Not sure he's sort of like, an indigenous sort of level hunter.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But he tracks the things down to the Playboy Mansion. And we get a scene here. What are your thoughts on this interlude at the Playboy Mansion?
I mean, it feels very forced, doesn't it? It doesn't feel natural or organic at all, I don't think. It like matches that scene, doesn't it? I think where he goes to the restaurant in the first movie. It's meant to mirror that, isn't it?
But up it. That's that.
Yeah, you're right. Up it. But yeah, being there just that it doesn't really work. I don't think it. I was tuned out for this scene, if I'm honest.
Yeah, for me. It feels a little bit like it doubles for both the strip club scene.
Yeah, we do get one in this as well, though, don't we?
Yeah, because you get the sort of the dick jokes in this one. In this bit where he's at the Playboy Bunny, he's like, wake up, this is what we talked about. And that sort of restaurant scene, but it's now at the Playboy Mansion, and you're going to get to meet Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, it just feels very much like, well, now we can say we're the first film that ever filmed at Playboy Mansion. It just feels like we can tick that box.
Yeah.
It also feels very Brett Ratnerish, and obviously that's that's become sort of almost an adjective in itself for not good.
Yeah, I've been Ratnered.
Yeah,
yeah, I know what you mean. If there's a weirdness to this scene, again, it's one of those scenes that as a kid, or as a young teen, I should say as well, where you're just like, yeah,
sure.
There's these devastatingly attractive women dancing around and playing like volleyball and stuff, and it's kind of funny. So you just let it sort of flow over you. But then you watch it as an adult, and you are kind of like, it feels a bit like, okay, this scene should be at least 2 minutes shorter.
And it's back to what you said actually earlier. It's just come to me is that it should be taking the piss out of the fact that the Playboy Mansion, but it's not. It's reveling in the fact that they're there, and it's Eddie Murphy, it's Axel Foley getting to he now has access to this, so he wants to celebrate it. If this had been Beverly Hills Cop 1, he would have been like roasting all these people here. But so I think, that's really interesting. That's what it is again, isn't it? It's that now I'm in the club, secret access. Yeah, I'm in the club now. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And that's what you're right. I think that's what this feels like. Sort of like, I can't be as mean as I have to be sort of that meanness, or that I don't know, that classing has to be directed elsewhere.
Yeah,
because I can't do it at these people because we're playing in somebody else's yard, literally playing in somebody else's yard right now.
Yeah, I can't think of a single good joke from the scene at all, really.
No,
I don't think is it Iron Man 2 when for the Stan Lee cameo when he gets mistaken to be Hugh Hefner because he's got a couple of young blonde. Now that is a better joke that works better in that situation than this whole kind of Playboy Hugh Hefner, because it feels like idolization. It feels like a celebration of that and the lifestyle. I know the bad guy's there, and that's underpinning it. So that's what we're supposed to get from it. The bad guy's there. So,
but it should be. Yeah, you're right. But the joke should be although it's Playboy, and Playboy was, was huge in the 80s. I mean, and there is a kind of there's a little bit of a joke where when Foley meets Hugh Hefner, he's like, Hugh, it's like, Hugh, oh, your magazine, I've done, the amount of times I've done, well, I can't say, and it's sort of, it's kind of funny, but it would have gone further with
Definitely.
with the first film. But also there's no joke there of going like, this is a guy that we know is dealing in guns and oil, and is now sort of like, yes, he's sort of there as a sort of what's not saying anthropologist, but as a donor to give money, to this charity, philanthropist. God, you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah.
My lips just don't work.
Billionaire Playboy philanthropist, yeah.
Yeah, but the joke should be, but you're doing it at the Playboy Mansion. So it should be, oh, this is the trifecta for you: pornography, guns, and oil. But they won't go there because it's Hugh Hefner's mansion, and it kind of feels a bit like, you say, well, we're pulling back on that. There is one thing in this scene though that we obviously, I think we both said we've got to see. There's an extra in this scene, and I don't know what direction he was given, but he's living his best life.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a guy that basically, there's all the women playing basketball, volleyball, and whatever in their bikinis, and this guy in a suit with a sort of a flute of champagne just dancing like mad.
Yeah. I mean, there is no other way to describe it other than as you already have done. It's like living his best life. Absolutely. I mean, yeah. Do you want to come to Playboy Mansion today? Do you want to do the scene? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Do you want to drink some free champagne? Yes, I do.
He's the kind
All
of
you've got
person...
to do is just be on camera, do something. All right. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I'm expecting that every time, this was like, I don't know how much champagne he had drank.
Yeah.
Like they were on like, this is like the 8th cut, and he's just like, screw it, I'm doing this now. And they were like, oh, fine, we're going with that. That's brilliant.
But he much like the Axel F theme, he lives along in the memory. You can't forget him. He stays with you.
I don't know who he is. I don't know if he ever did any other thing ever again. But to me,
I assume he's Eddie Murphy's mate, right? And he's like, "Come along, God."
I can imagine. Yeah, it's in my mind now. You mentioned it, sort of. You message it makes you think of it's Jean-Claude Van Damme in Breaking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Sort of like, I'm going to get noticed in the background.
Yes, 100%.
So yeah, it's going down as one of my favorite things. It's up there now with this and The Abyss, where a guy gets his trousers pulled down.
I'm gonna have to check that out. So I will like the cock out and Teen Wolf, of course. Yeah.
Yes, these things just sort of like oopsies that they get.
Franken cliffhanger when he's smiling when the woman drops from the helicopter pilot. He's smiling. Yeah, he's smiling when she drops from the line. Yeah, you're right.
They've gone through editing suites for hours, and these things get missed. But
yeah,
it's fair play. But yeah, we go through this scene. It kind of then continues.
It's just to lead us on to the next one, really.
It is. This is the thing. It leads on to the next bit and the next. But this is very much sort of. You see, this feels more so than the first. This feels sometimes there are scenes that feel like skits.
Yes, that is definitely true. This one more than the last one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think that is because of the approach that was taken, that was like, right, this is the Tony Scott bit where it's going to be tight and it's going to be visual. This is the Eddie Murphy bit where he can ad lib and be loose and do this. It feels like there's that framing of sections that are like, you can do that here, but not there.
That's a good shout. Yeah.
The other thing to call out is an early cameo by Chris Rock.
I think Murphy gave him the shot, didn't he? So
yeah. So giving that step up was kind of cool. Beyond this, it kind of leads into the finale, really, to this. It sort of just ramps up into the final bit.
Well, I think the next bit is speaking to Jan on the phone, isn't it? Because she sort of had a little side quest, which we don't see, where she's going to use her contacts to research into Jürgen Prochnow business.
Yeah, Maxwell Dent, yeah.
So then she basically calls up and goes, exposition, go here. So we can just get to the big shootout scene in the factory. And he's like, oh, but that's got the same, because she talks about the oil fields, doesn't she? And then we had that really heavy-handed close-up scene earlier of Axel Foley noticing muddy trainers. The most mud I've ever seen around trainers.
Yeah, perfectly lined around the trainers as well.
It
Yeah,
always makes me think, actually, years and years and years ago, my partner, she did the thing when you put flour at Christmas time and you make it look
yes,
like it's like snow and little kids fall for it. It was a really sweet moment. It made me think of that. But obviously, that is to convince little kids. This is supposed to be convincing
yeah,
grown-ups.
yeah. But there's a production designer somewhere that was like, those trainers are there, mud, and just threw
Yeah.
mud at those trainers. Yes, it is. It is. It's like an exposition scene where it is. We've worked clues.
Yeah.
And they make the thing is, what's funny is they make a point of it. Like they have a fingerprint that brings them back to Dean Stockwell's character.
That's a cool scene.
Yeah, with you get to see Billy's apartment, and it's sort of like he's got all these.
It's like a serial killer.
Yeah, his big plants and his turtle, Big Al, and then all his guns.
Yeah.
But you're right. They sort of reach a point where they literally say, like, we don't have enough evidence, or we know it's them, but we don't have enough evidence. And so it's sort of, Jan sort of, exposition Jan then turns up and is like, here's enough information to get you to the next part of the quest, which is lucky. And then whilst they're doing it as well, they get the clue. They're able to decipher the alphabet letters.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and you get the racetrack is now going to be the E.
Yeah, well, I think because he wants the last one to be. To be fair, I think actually this part of the film works. He wants the last one to be obvious, doesn't he? Because he needs the police to get to them whilst they're doing the heist in order for the framing of.
Yes, it needs to be shown to be an inside job.
Yeah, so I think the first few Zodiac style envelopes were probably really hard to decipher, but he makes the E really obvious, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah, it's easy to decipher, and he actually says that they'll be able to break the code when I let them break the code.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like this bit where, like, because again, this is the part where if like the Dean Stockwell character in particular had anything about them, because he knew the plan, like they know the plan is to use the money from these thefts, including from his own racetrack, to buy the guns, to sell the guns, to make more money, and to get himself out of sort of trouble and stuff. But no one seems to say what happens at F.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
How do we sort of shut this down at E? Like, unless so and if he knew that it was supposed to sort of go this way, I don't know. That's the one bit I'm a bit like, no one seems to have worked beyond this.
It might have been a slight, I guess there isn't time for subplots in this really, but it might have been an interesting subplot to have had his growing suspicions. Perhaps this is more of a Michael Mann or a Chris Nolan version of this movie where Dean Stockwell character has growing suspicions and
he realizes he's going to be the patsy. He's been set up for it.
Yeah, but he's just meant to be a bit of a dumbass sleazy guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because even the guys he hires to do jobs always do things wrong. They're almost kind of those, again, back to Batman, they're almost kind of those Batman-esque rubbish
goons.
henchmen.
Yeah,
goons, yeah.
Yeah, no, they are. They're sort of not so much inept, but they're not good enough to get won over on the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
But I like this final heist again. Like I think again, it's all really good. Looks great, working well, and it leads to the kind of there's like a mini climax where and there's a character we haven't actually spoken about yet, but you sort of need to at this point is previously we had the chief in the last film. There was that chief who he sort of said everyone feared, but like he didn't say much, but everyone feared. Like he could hear you in his office and he'll break you for it.
Yeah.
This time we have Chief Lutz.
Yeah.
Who is just this vile, shouty little Napoleon of a character throughout, and nobody respects. It's clear, like he's a career politician kind of police chief. He's really in with the mayor and all this other stuff. He takes credit for solving the crime. And he's the one character in this film where I think it feels like he is set up to just you're designed to hate him, who he's designed to be hated, but he's the one character I feel like leers into cartoonishness too much.
Agreed. Yeah, he's a caricature, really, isn't he? And also, I think they make a mistake early on. Early on, they say like, "Well, the only three left: Bogomil, Taggart, and Billy. Well, the only three left. He's got rid of all the other, members of this team, and he's brought in new people, and it's that kind of new manager coming in, clearing out the old, bringing in the new because he wants to shape it his way." And I like that idea, but then he spends the whole movie going, "Well, I'm going to get rid of you, or you're going to be suspended, or this is going to happen to you," and never follows through on any of it.
Yeah.
Where they've said he has done before, so that doesn't quite tally together. So I think they needed to make him all bark and no bite, really, for the rest of the movie to work. He doesn't quite work for me,
or for them to do it, because he threatens to do it in front of the mayor like several times, and the mayor doesn't say anything until the end. I almost feel like he needs to fire them.
Yeah.
And then that they carry on the case anyway.
Proper road cops then, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's actually the mayor that sort of like at the end of the film, as we do see, says like, Lutz, like, you're fired. Guys, here's your badges back, kind of.
Yeah, that would have been better. Agreed.
It gives that sort of consequence and then, it's then I feel like that way, then I feel that when Billy pulls out the shotguns and the and the overcoat, I'd feel a bit more like, okay, that feels a bit more like you've gone rogue rather than you're kind of nuts.
Yeah.
But they do have this sort of this mini climax where they solve it all, and they blame the Dean Stockwell character. He gets sort of, what's his name? His name's Chip Kane.
That's right. Yeah, fantastic.
Some great names in this. And yeah, but then
and it's like get Foley out of town. It's that classic kind of
yeah.
But
they decide not to. They see the oil field because they see the mud come off a horse. It's always been in the field by the oil thing, and they see the red mud.
Yeah, I found that a weird line as well. It's where he goes to graze in that muddy field.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's unfortunate for the horse.
Yeah. Anyway.
But again, you get love the shots when you get you said about the golden
amazing.
hues, the sunset coming down and behind it.
It's like red, isn't it? All the ground is like a red clay or a red, I don't know, like the texture of it, isn't it? Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yes. Yeah, yes, it looks great. But they see it and they sort of enter it. And you get some quite good sun scenes. You get the sort of like, do you love rap? He knocks out the goon. But this is where I'm interested in your thoughts on this. So this version of Billy, right? So Taggart throughout this, is actually upped from the first film. They've actually elevated, I feel, Taggart. They've made him more of a sort of a decent detective. Like, he tracks them down. He sort of holds the line. He is the sort of senior officer of them. Even if at one point they do compare him to Gerald Ford, who was actually 74 at the time this film was released, which is kind of a burn on John Ashton.
Absolutely, yeah.
Billy feels kind of like they've brought him down a little bit. As he almost like the comedy sidekick. Like, there's this he does things, but like he's still kind of bumbling.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I think there's too many moments. So the bazooka works. That's always kind of a funny joke. I mean, they do it in Commando. It's done here. I think, to show the ineptitude, but also like the want to be a bigger action hero than he really is. I think that moment kind of worked, and he accidentally blows up the truck with all the guns. But then you add on top of that, like you said, the two shotguns, which has got to be the most impractical.
Yeah.
Because you need two hands for a shotgun, right? So I can't even logistically work that out. And if you've got Arnie's cool shotgun from T2, that's the only one I can think of. So yeah, you're right. And then but I think also for it being a Tony Scott film, and we've given him lots of praise, and I think rightly so, and for him being hired for his action scenes, there's something slightly off in this end sequence. It never feels. It feels like a bunch of people shooting blanks at each other.
Yes.
It never feels like it's a big action scene. And we praised the first one for saying, like, at the start, Axel F. Eddie Murphy almost doesn't look like he can hold a gun properly, but then by the end, he's an action hero. This one, I don't know, something about this scene. And we also, we didn't mention, did we, in the first one, that It is the Commando Mansion, which is
Yes.
where they storm in the first one. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's fine. It's not a bad scene. And once it moves inside the warehouse, I think it picks up. But the standoff outside, where you've got Billy Taggart and Axel behind some boxes, and this horde of faceless henchmen shooting at each other, doesn't feel. It almost feels like kids playing at cops and robbers or something. I don't know.
No, I agree. Actually, I think it's a really good point. I think you and I talked about film not too long ago in the Statham retrospective, Wrath of Man,
Hmm.
Guy Ritchie film. And one of the things that I really praise that film for is that in the finale, it's they rob um, a bank repository kind of thing. There's like a building, and the way it's shot is you are clear where pretty much everyone is.
Hmm.
Like it's well set up and it feels brutal, but you're like, oh, they're pinned down because of this and this. They're trapped in this room and they're shooting here, that sort of thing. That it was a real. You could picture it in your mind's eye like how this was working.
Hmm.
And I think you're right with this. There's no real clear shot of anyone shooting each other. It's just sort of like there's people coming up over boxes and shooting at things, but you never see
Yeah.
what it is they're shooting at. So yeah, they could be like 40 yards away from each other or 100 miles. Like it
Yeah.
never feels like it's the stakes there. So I agree with that. It's a very good point.
But it's better once it goes inside, and it's kind of we
Yes,
get some standoffs, and again we get the Tony Scott lighting,
lighting.
and we get a John Woo kind of scene. Actually, we
Yeah,
get like pigeons, and we get a fan that's whirring around, and the sunlight shining through. And looking at timelines, this is pre-Killer. This is
yeah.
pre-Hard Boiled. So actually, did Tony Scott inspire John Woo? I don't know.
They have a similar visual style, don't
They
they?
do, yeah, yeah.
They really do. Yeah, I love that so much. Jurgen Prochnow sort of like in the shadows,
Mm,
and the fans go, "It's awesome." I mean, this is like noirish,
yeah.
kind of styles.
Really makes me think of the end of Hard Target in the big warehouse.
Yes, yeah, I love that film. Um, um, any film in which Jean-Claude Van Damme punches out a snake is a good film.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And shoots a guy 3 times, then high kicks him, and then shoots
yeah,
him 3 more times. I mean, I'm sold.
yeah, such a good film. Anyway, one of the things, but and then you get the silhouette of
Yeah.
um, Bridget Nielsen coming in. And again, you see why she's chosen. Like she's just a presence. Like
Mm.
in this, she's so well, and the makeup and hair and everything design is very 80s, but very well done. And this is where I have kind of a problem with this ending of
Mm.
this film. So sort of Eddie Murphy or Axel's pinned down. She's got a gun on him, and then she gets like blown sideways, and John Ashton's just shot her in the side of the head. Like Taggart's just killed her. There's no like freeze, get your gun off.
Yeah.
And he walks in and there's a quip where he's just like, women. And I'm just like, you've just killed a woman. Like, without declaring your presence. That can't be like legal. Like, so again, one of those things where as a kid you're like, yeah, cool. Now I'm a
Yeah.
bit like, yeah, I'm sure this is going to end up in court.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. If it's not swept under the carpet by the mayor.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that moment, but it does, as you were talking, it made me think of the earlier moment way back when. Sorry, I'm flashing right back. But when Axel is undercover and he meets the guy in the bar,
Mm.
there is a little bit of a more of a misogynistic streak in this as well. The bitch count is off the
Yeah.
chain in this movie. The amount of times they say bitch and the way they treat that woman in the bar, and you now
Awful.
saying actually the way that he's like, oh, I got that bitch. There's a little bit of a streak here as well, which I don't feel like was in the first one either.
No, I think there's again this thing of he like because he refers to her like Bridget Nielsen's character. Basically, was it Carla Fry? When she walks off, he's like, "That's a big bitch."
Yeah,
Like that's your description of her. Like it does feel like I don't know. Yeah, there's a misogynistic, there's a derogatory tone to women in this.
and maybe that's a bit more that you were saying like bitterness, a bit more of that like maybe it's trying to be edgy, but it's
Yeah.
missing it this time, whereas it got it last time. There's
Yeah, it's weird though because it kind of gives with one hand and takes with the other. Because she's shown as being competent, strong,
Yeah,
sexy, like she's sort of in charge,
that's
and
interesting. And Jan is useful to the team at doing her research, but also is just a sexual object for Axel F to want to sleep with, but he can't because it's his mate's daughter.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. There's that kind of there's some positivity, but there's some negativity that goes with it.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of funny. Like the script and the directing is giving these female characters kind of agency and stuff. Yeah,
Mm,
it's the character of Axel F that kind of brings them
mm,
down,
mm.
which is odd. I mean, there's a when it's Jan and Axel together, like, yeah, there was a you said like a consolatory sort of form. He's not
There's a
coming on to
sweetness,
her.
there's a likeness to their
Yeah,
relationship. Yeah, it is more brother and sisterly than it is anything else. Yeah.
I mean, there was the opportunity at one point, like he lets himself into Bogomil's house and stuff, and she sort of puts the gun on him at one point,
Mm,
and she says to him, look, you let yourself in, you can let yourself out. I'm going to go have a shower. There's no innuendo
no.
spouted, so they could have done that where he'd be like, oh, I'll be in a minute, or while your dad's away or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So they didn't do that. But yeah, I don't know. There still feels that kind of you
Mm.
know misogyny a little bit, which is just 80s films a little bit. But yeah, um,
Yeah, so I don't mean, and we spoke about the skits, and I think maybe that's why I don't like this one as much. I don't feel like I laughed in this one anywhere near as much. I mean, the Gilbert Gottfried improvised scene is fine, but compared to the Serge scene, which is meant to be this film's version of, it's nowhere near as good. And
yeah,
I don't think I just don't, yeah, the comedy doesn't land. And that's really interesting what you said about Tony Scott being hired to do the action. That makes total
mm,
sense. Eddie Murphy will bring the comedy. Something isn't quite clicking here
gelling,
for me. Yeah,
yeah,
in the comedy he's trying to present, and I think maybe we've solved it. It's where he is not in balance. He is in balance between the old Eddie Murphy and who he
and
wants to be.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really interesting.
yeah. Because I wonder, I haven't gone back, and I do wonder if you go back and watch. I mean, we know some of this definitely exists in um Coming to America as a little, is that something? There's definitely something there, and I can't really think about like trading places, but yeah, it's interesting how this sort of lays this
Mm,
out. But um, yeah, but the fact that anyone the villain's being killed off by the police or by the hero, or whatever, is not new. It's not
yeah,
shocking. It's more the fact she gets blown across the sort of like the like
I know what you mean. Yeah, because
yeah.
it's not. Yeah, there even needs to be just a, like, put the gun down. No, just even one line. Absolutely. Yeah,
There needs to be a second of giving her the opportunity and she
yeah,
raises the gun further or pulls the hammer and then Taggart takes the opportunity like that. He needs to give her the opportunity. Having not given her the opportunity kind of
yeah.
feels a little bit,
It's an
cold-blooded.
execution, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Um, and you're worried about Billy, and then you realise that, oh no, Taggart is the dark one.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Beverly's
um,
got three. His Taggart's turned to the dark side. Maybe what saves him is that Maureen comes back.
yeah. Or
Maybe,
maybe that's what brought Maureen back. She was like, oh my god, he's all
well, good.
red-blooded again.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
Or she heard of it, or he said, "Did you hear what I did to that big blonde bitch? Don't
Yeah,
mess with me, Maureen."
yeah, yeah. That's what drives her. But you do get the resolution. The mayor comes in, fires the chief, and
Yeah.
and Bogomil is then going to be made the chief. Um, and all is right with the world. Apart from the fact that back in Detroit, Paul Reiser's character Jeff has crashed the Ferrari, and Inspector Todd is waiting for him to come home. Um, this is the thing because they had. This is that thing I was talking about differences, but because they had Lutz being the shouty
Mm,
chief, you couldn't have Inspector Todd doing the same thing. So
true. Yeah.
it definitely feels like they've sort of like toned down like Todd as
Hmm,
well,
hmm.
where instead of like really ripping into Foley at the end of the film for not being in the car and having
Yeah.
Paul Reiser
Lying to
crash it,
him.
he
Yeah.
just says basically sort of like stop playing around in California and come back and do your real job. Where really it should be you're fired.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
You said
It's
you're
about you've cost
undercover. You're
us.
not
Yeah.
even,
Yeah.
yeah. You cost us money. You disappeared. You didn't take leave. You just said you were going undercover and left.
Yeah, yeah.
And stuff. So, yeah. Rogue, what do they call it? Loose cannon police. They were sort of, just as sort of prevalent as rocket launchers were in everyday armories.
Yeah.
The final thing I wanted to touch on, that differs this from this becomes a thing. I think this is a Tony Scott thing. It feels a thing that in the last film, Axel's wearing basically a t-shirt and a hoodie.
Mm-hmm.
And jeans. Like he's, they've made him look not scruffy, scruffy's the wrong word, but he sort of looks like working class detective. Like, he's playing that part. This film, Murphy's wanting to look the part, want to be a movie star. That jacket is, it's got Detroit Lions, it's the Letterman jacket kind of thing. Becomes the iconic uniform of Axel Foley. I mean, it stuck around. It comes back in 3. A version of it is now going to be an Axel F. It's an iconic piece of costume, isn't it?
Yeah, that's 100% what they were going for, isn't it? Indy's got his hat. What can we give Axel F? He's from Detroit. Yeah, definitely. It's a real attempt to, you mentioned actually Bridget Nielsen having a silhouette. I think I've heard it said before that if you can recognize a character from a silhouette, they have now entered into iconic status. You could silhouette of Superman, of Batman, of Indy. You'd know it straight away. So it's definitely what they're going for, and I think it works. I never really questioned that. It didn't feel like the Armani suit felt like him putting on a costume. This does feel like something that probably, with a bit more cash and he's moved on for a couple of years, would be something that Axel would choose to wear. I think it's in keeping. I think with the character.
Yes. I don't know if it's iconic for the film, but it's it doesn't feel a costume, if you know what I mean. It feels it doesn't feel manufactured. It feels authentic.
No, yeah.
I wonder how I will feel when we watch it in 3. I'll be interested if it feels a bit like that's now the styling. But yeah, it's an interesting film. I mean, this is 87, so this is going up against Predator and a couple of other films that year. It did well, but it wasn't the film of the year. Not entirely sure what was, but it's I
mean, it made $250 million, didn't it? So that's worldwide, I think. So it did all right. What, it was about 40 million budget, something like that, I think I read.
Yes.
8 million of that for Murphy. So, nothing to be sniffed at. It was very successful, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it did what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
It made him, I think it elevates him into superstardom. I think he was getting there, and I think this definitely sort of highlights it.
Now he's a name that greenlights films, isn't it? That's
it. Now he's a bankable. He'd been a bankable name, but now I think this. We said about Beverly Hills Cop made him a bankable sort of star. This establishes him as like, you can do it repeatedly. Like you can do
Eddie Murphy will sell a film, and Eddie Murphy can make the film that he wants to make because people will go and watch it. That's who he is now, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I was wrong. Actually, I've just checked. It was the film of the year for 1987. It grossed 153 million. In that
States.
Yeah. Yeah. Followed by Platoon, Fatal Attraction, The Untouchables, 3 Men and a Baby, The Secret of My Success, Stakeout, Lethal Weapon came at number 8, The Witches of Eastwick, and Predator. That's your top 10. So
not bad,
No, but it's up against some others. I mean, some big films in there for the year. I mean, beats out RoboCop at 14. Dirty Dancing's at 16.
Of course, that's where Roddy Cox was during the making of this. Was off making RoboCop. That's why they had to put him in a coma for the making of this, wasn't it?
Yeah, you can't be the good chief in this because you've got to go be the bad corporate head in RoboCop.
But I mean, Fatal Attraction and 3 Men and a Baby, they were culturally phenomenons, weren't they? When they came out, so to come out on top of those two, that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, Lethal Weapon comes in at 8th, so 65 million. It's so weird to see. I mean, this is obviously 35, 40 years ago, but when people are going, this was a massive success. It made 153 million. Now we're
Yeah.
like, if it doesn't make that in a weekend,
It's ridiculous,
automatic
isn't
flop.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. What I always find funny is when you see these and you look at a film in the top 20 and you go, I've never heard of that film.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, made money then, died a death since. So do you know of a film called Outrageous Fortune?
No, never heard of it.
No, there you go. That was number 14. No, sorry, number 15 for that year. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, it made his money. It made him a star. And he went on to do quite a bit more then.
Yeah, so Coming into America is after this. Harlem
Going to
Nights
America.
is after this.
Yeah,
The Harlem Nights, is that right? Is that the one he did? Like the kind of jazzy.
yeah. Yes, I'm trying to get to his filmography, but yes, that's
So as you said, it's where he's like, he's a producer on this. He's not a producer. He's co-writer, isn't he? Or he's like story credit. And
he gets a
but then he
story credit
becomes,
because of the ad libs and his scenes.
now he's Eddie Murphy, and he says, I want to make this film, so people say yes.
Yes, and I think this is, as you said, this is where he can now make the films he wants to make.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to think, like, is that where it kind of
Yeah, looking at his filmography, it doesn't last for long, does it?
not goes wrong? Yeah,
Boomerang really flopped, didn't it?
because this is it. I mean,
Vampire in Brooklyn flopped.
yeah, straight the year after this, exactly. Yeah, is Coming to America. He makes a couple of the stands up. Another stand up. Yeah, Harlem Nights, 1990s, another 48 Hours.
Mm-hmm.
Boomerang, The Distinguished Gentleman. Yeah, like he really sort of hits a slide actually.
And then segues into family movies, doesn't he?
Yeah, and then you get like 1994's Beverly Hills Cop 3. And you're right. I think 95 actually is it where? Well, it's a weird one. This is it. We'll maybe talk about this after 3, but like the 90s is a really odd time for Eddie Murphy. Where he's kind of, you say is that weird balance. I mean, you get Vampire in Brooklyn, followed by the Nutty Professor. And then you get Metro, followed by Mulan. So it's kind of a bit all over the place. He's remembered, but again, it's that thing of like, I don't think he has. I mean, Shrek films aside, Eddie Murphy doesn't have an outstanding filmography, does he? Really?
No, he has really bright moments, doesn't he? Like I really like Bowfinger. I think that's a fantastic comedy with Steve Martin. What was he did the Dolomite? My Name is Dolomite, which was a very clever. Good. Yeah. So, but he has these kind of bright spots. But yeah, he never really parlayed he never really cashed in, did he, on the status he had at this point that we're talking about now? It never really went where I guess we sort of thought it might have done.
But this is where it's weird that he makes choices, and they're never, in Harlem Nights, 1999, he directs it.
Mm-hmm.
Him and he's got Richard Pryor. He's got Richard Pryor. That's like his dream thing, isn't it? Right, I'm going to star in it. I'm going to direct it. I'm going to get Richard Pryor, who's like, his idol as a stand-up comic and actor, and you should say he's pulling the levers of Hollywood at this point. He has the power to do so.
Yeah,
he never really, beyond those first couple of really like heavyweight hitters, he never really delivers again. As you say, but Bowfinger's a good example of like where
it's cultish, though, isn't it? It's not a big success.
No.
And you and I haven't done Jackie Chan, it's really quite an interesting comparison when you think how he went on to become an industry for himself with his audience. I guess maybe that's what Murphy was looking for. It was like, I can have a kind of, I'm going to use a term, and I don't mean it to be, kind of a black Hollywood industry. I can me and Richard Pryor, we can be in a movie together, and it can be mine, and I can, Dolomite is my name feels totally like a latter day kind of, this is a black Hollywood, this is a black industry movie.
Yeah.
It's literally a movie about a small niche black movie industry filmmaking. So it almost felt like maybe that's what he was trying to do with his Vampire in Brooklyn, with his Harlem Nights, and it's a shame maybe that it didn't become its own thing, that he didn't go on to have this, and maybe that's why he then chose to make this move into family comedy. And okay, well, if people don't want that, if there's not going to be the audience for it, then what I'll do is I'll focus on making a bit of money.
But the thing is, this is the thing, what's interesting about this, and we'll tail off on this point, is there really is, we talk about Jackie Chan following the Police Story, this idea of him becoming, Police Story wasn't even his opening salvo. Like, he'd done stuff already. Like, he was an established Hong Kong movie star. And the Police Story is one of his most well-known franchises. But you're right, like, Jackie Chan was like, this is what I'm good at. This is my shtick, and I can then apply it to different genres. Like, I can do a Hong Kong film, or I can do an adventure film, or I can do a cop film, or I can do this. But generally, it's a Jackie Chan film. Like, there's going to be stunts and fighting and comedy. Like, that's the combination that's going to work. And, when you look at other 80s stars and stuff that did the similar thing, that was like, that's what I'm going to do. Like, I'm not an actor. Like, I'm not going to win an Oscar, but I'm going to do this, this, and this. And they then found the right directors to raise them up if they weren't going to do it themselves. I think of Arnie sort of pairing with Cameron repeatedly, or choosing these directors quite wisely. John McTiernan sort of like with Predator and stuff. Murphy sort of like hits it and then rejects it. He's like, oh, I can do this thing with Axel Foley, but like you say, I then don't want to be that, so I'm going to do other things. And I don't think he ever finds his own shtick. I mean, if I think of Donkey or Mushu in Mulan, that's kind of, without the sort of like, the misogyny, it's kind of he's doing his Axel Foley shtick.
Yeah.
So he sort of comes round to it and reapplies it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, and if you've ever seen, I'm just looking at the I Spy that he did.
Yes, with Owen
Wilson.
That came out around the rush hour sort of time, Shanghai Nights, and they were doing these. Yeah,
it's him. That is, if you've ever seen that is definitely him trying to recapture that kind of buddy cop, buddy adventure kind of thing.
Owen Wilson is the new Nick Nolte. Yeah.
But yeah, I never thought you'd have that comparison.
Or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. He has a very odd career. Beyond that, it'd be interesting to see, like, he's come back to things like he did, Coming to America 2 and or Coming to America, and now he's gone back to Axel F. Yeah, I don't know. It's an odd career. Like, you've done like the Statham films, and you're moving on to, I don't know if you want to announce it, but you're moving on to another actor with a kind of varied filmography. But I don't think you could do Murphy's filmography, because it's like with Statham, you can go, yeah, there's some crap like action films in there, or maybe not to the top, but you're going to get a Statham movie out of it. And if you like a Statham film, you're going to get a Statham film. Even like Blitz and War, which we did, I'm like, yeah, there's some good stuff in those. But Murphy, you're kind of like, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to get.
Yeah, 100%. There's quite a few of these I would actively not want to watch, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, we shall round it. Any final thoughts then on Beverly Hills Cop 2?
Just to say that I think perhaps, I won't speak for yourself. I think I have been a little bit critical of it tonight, but I still really enjoy it. It's a very enjoyable movie. It's fast paced. It's well directed. It's well acted. It feels for me, it feels like a bit of a step down. I think the way I think of the first one is that was an action comedy starring Eddie Murphy, and this one is a Eddie Murphy vehicle. And the balance is shifted, and it's just not quite hitting it for me. while still being, I watched it last night. Actually, in fact, wasn't it? It was only last night. But if it came on TV now when we finished, I could sit and easily sit and watch it again. It's a good, fun, fast paced, enjoyable movie.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that you're right. I think the balance of power has shifted, and I think that is kind of there. But you're right. I could watch this film any day of the week. Like we have, as watching it with a critical eye and to talk about it. I think, I've been a bit critical, and we've sort of highlighted some issues with it. But I still do love this film. Like it's into rotation. I watch this film, and I love the soundtrack. I love the action in it. I think the people in it are good. It's just, as I said, to me, this is an 80s milestone of a movie. And so, it has problems. I think it hasn't aged as well as, I thought it may have done when I watched it. I was like, oh, this is a little bit. But yeah, it's still good. I still really enjoy it. And I think, it's but we shall see how well this franchise does, because he returns in 1994. With Beverly Hills Cop 3, and we shall talk about that in soon.
Yeah, I don't think I've watched that since the 90s, which is probably quite telling.
It's quite funny because I looked at like Letterboxd, and I've only been using Letterboxd for the last couple of years, for the last 3 years. And so there's obviously a massive gap in the films you haven't rewatched. I've watched both Beverly Hills Cop 1 and Beverly Hills Cop 2 twice in that period, and never watched Beverly Hills Cop 3.
Sure.
So this is the first one I'm going back to in at least a decade. So it's going to be interesting to go back to this. I remember a scene about where he dresses as a mascot elephant in a theme park.
Sure.
About it. That's all I can really remember from it.
Yeah.
So
if Van Damme can fight a penguin a sudden death, I could dress as an elephant.
Yeah, that's it. Yes. The 90s were a different era. Does it?
It's all Jim Carrey's fault. That's what I'm going to say right here, right now. Obviously, it's not. I'm being facetious, but
I'll be interested to see what year. No, this comes before Ace Ventura, so, but it's an interesting point to make.
Sure.
I wonder about that. Anyway, Jack, what have you got coming up, and where can people find you?
So as you said, I'm not quite ready to announce yet, but I have got season 2 of Back to Filmography launching very soon. I'm just going to get straight into it. I think I was going to think about mini season and all this kind of stuff, but I'm too excited now to get going. So I'll have a wrap up on the stay for season 1 and then get going on season 2. And then within Comics Emotion, got our little projects going. Tony and I still going through all the comics of Brubaker and Phillips, so we're really enjoying that.
Yes.
And we are still doing our season's greetings, and we're still in Harlan County, Kentucky, catching up with Raylan and what he's up to, him and Boyd, and the wonderful duality they bring to that show and the shenanigans they get up to.
Excellent. Yeah, so much good stuff. So much stuff on Comics in Motion. I need to have Tony back on soon. We're going to be, we are lining up to do Hudson Hawk, so another 90s oddity. Yeah,
fits a lot of the things we've been talking about tonight, actually.
Yeah, vanity projects. Yes.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
But yes, and links down below for some of those things. But do check out, like I say, if if you're behind on the Back to Filmography Statham, go check out some amazing conversations on there, including yours truly. But some fantastic. I've really enjoyed going through. There's a couple I haven't listened to because I've not seen the film, and I'm waiting. So spoilers, beware for those. But yeah, check it all out.
As you know, I do the same for your sister show. I save them up once I've managed to watch the movies. Yeah,
it's
totally fair.
But for now, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy this, do leave us a review and go check out our Patreon. We've got so much going on there. Exactly for the sister podcast, Stories Out Time and Space. We're doing our Apocalypse bonus, or Apocalypse season, and the bonus things. We literally this week have just gone out and done. I Am Legend has now gone out, completing the I Am Legend trilogy of adaptations on the main feed. We did Last Man on Earth and Omega Man, and we did the Will Smith one on the Patreon. So just for £5 a month, you get to enjoy a whole bunch of content. 30-minute thoughts where I just give my thoughts on things, trekking through the Twilight Zone, and so many other bits and pieces to come down the line, including some Kurosawa, which we're going to be announcing very, very soon. But for now, Jack, thank you so much for joining me in this one.
Thank you for having me.
Conversation. It's been really good. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and we shall see you again soon.